All right, I know the guys got Travis Kelce, but can we please get Patrick Mahomes some help? We got all that and much more on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, football fans, and welcome into another episode of Locked On NFL, your daily podcast covering all the biggest stories around the National Football League. Here is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Big thank you to all you everydayers out there making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget you can subscribe and follow always for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. It is Tuesday, so you've got Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL on your favorite social media. Myself, Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola. Appreciate you very much for joining us here for another episode of Locked On NFL. And today's episode of Locked On NFL brought to you by friends at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the promo code Locked On NFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. On today's episode of Locked On NFL, we're going to be taking a look at our yikes and our likes for the week, including a guy that just kind of has had a hard time learning his lesson. We're going to take a look as well in our second piece of the show today about the teams that we just are kind of over at this point. We're going to pour one out for three different teams today. We're knocking three teams out of contention. And to kick us all off, the Kansas City Chiefs come up short against the Philadelphia Eagles in a Super Bowl rematch on Monday Night Football. And how things would be different if Patrick Mahomes just had a wide receiver who didn't have a bad case of the drops. Luke, this game for me completely came down to a couple of different big plays that I want to highlight here in a little bit. But at the crux or the core of all this, the Kansas City Chiefs simply just failed to move the ball up and down the field because they don't have wide receivers that can catch the football, and that's got to drive a guy like Patrick Mahomes nuts.
It does. I don't know if there's a place in the NFL where it's easier to be a wide receiver than Kansas City, because Patrick Mahomes can buy a bunch of time. You can take forever to run your route if you want. Yeah. You can put all kinds of razzle-dazzle on it, get open. You can do all kinds of stuff. And if you're in a scramble, as long as you know the scramble rules, he'll find you. Right. And it's always going to be on, right? It's going to be right on the body. It's going to be right where it needs to be.
He could be laying down horizontally in midair and he will put it where it needs to be. We've seen
and that happened in the Super Bowl.
Yes, we've seen it over and over again.
So there's no excuse, I don't think, for what we've seen from Sky Moore and Justin Watson and all these guys. Valdez-Scantling had a big one. And you're just looking at like the story of how the Chiefs got here. Second round pick on Sky Moore, second round pick on Mecole Hardman, and then he cut him, and then he trade more for him later. And $11 million a year for MVS. It's a lot of stuff to go into a unit that is, I'll say arguably, because I'm not going to think of all 31 wide receiver rooms, but arguably the worst in the league. Is there a worse wideout room than that one?
Not if you're counting drops. They lead the league in drops right now. Oh my God. Man. Like, it's rough. It's rough. It's so rough out here.
And look, football's a team game, man. Everybody agrees Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. He's the best dude in the league. Best, big, most important guy, MVP. All that. Like, I get it. He is the guy. But football's a team game. So you can have the guy and lose if you have a more complete team. And what have I been saying about the Eagles since like week 3, since they kind of figured out a couple things they had going on early in the season? Most complete team in football.
Yep.
Every single position room in Philadelphia has at least someone that can be your go-to for what that position needs to do on the field.
Yeah. And I think that this Monday night win against Kansas City was a great illustration of that. This was not a big AJ Brown game. So what do? They find Devonta Smith down the right sideline on a huge 41-yard play that leads to the tush push to get Jalen Hurts into the end zone on what would be the go-ahead and winning touchdown. They dump one off to DeAndre Swift, who picks up a bunch of yardage after the catch on a screen. They run the ball. Jalen Hurts, who took a lot of sacks, took a lot of hits in this game. Shout out to the Kansas City defense and defensive line for playing their hearts out in this one. but you
Jerry
just saw
Sneed had a
them.
day too.
Yeah. And so, but you just saw this Philadelphia Eagles team just continue to be able to go elsewhere, having other options to feed into throughout this game, which Kansas City just simply didn't. And I've seen some people say, well, Patrick Mahomes should make these, mediocre wide receivers better. And look, I'm using mediocre in terms, but that's the thing. I'm using mediocre right now in terms of like where these guys are right now. I think Rashee Rice and Sky Moore as the future of this wide receiver room, they're going to be fine. They just haven't had the time. But I think that like, I've seen people say that he's not making them better, Patrick Mahomes, and I disagree. I think that he's doing everything that he's supposed to do. They're just simply not catching the football. Justin Watson at one point was wide open over the middle of the field and went straight up alligator arms trying to catch a football, and just like it just popped through. Like these are the things that just have to drive a guy like Patrick Mahomes. And let me include Travis Kelce in that number too, because Travis Kelce's playing his heart out. Did get stripped in the red zone, but I mean, the guy can't do all of it. He's averaging 72 receiving yards per game since 2017 or whatever, like the most out of any tight end in history. Like somebody else got to catch something. I don't know. It drives me nuts for this guy.
It's interesting that this is not like, it's not the first time that Kansas City's had this week 1 against the Lions. Yeah, same deal, right?
Yep.
Like you catch the ball, you win that game. And for me, when this stuff happens, to your point, I'm a big JT O'Sullivan QB School fan. Mm-hmm. Great YouTube channel. He says it all the time. You can't catch him for him.
Yep.
You put it where you all you can do is put it where it's supposed to be.
Yep.
So on those, if you say Mahomes should elevate them more, I ask you, where else should that ball be then? What else should he do?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Like if you have a critique and you think, that ball should have been further out, that ball should have been lower, whatever. I'm willing to hear that, but don't give me the generic, right? If you want to really make that argument, then let's hash that out. But when you get into the playoffs, the patterns are what are going to define you. And 2 playoff teams from the NFC, right? Maybe arguably the best 2 teams in the NFC, Detroit and Philadelphia, have now beaten Kansas City because of this problem. You don't think you're getting into a game with Baltimore or Miami or whoever it is it's going to be, right? Whoever pops out of the AFC East, like, you don't think you're going to get into a game and this is going to be a problem? Like,
right.
You got to fix this. And with a team like KC, that's not, it's not ambiguous whether or not they will make the playoffs, right? There are some teams that are fighting for that, and that's the talker. But for a team like KC, to me, you now have 6 remaining games to get that together.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's gonna sink you.
Yeah, and they've got the best defense we've seen a Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City Chiefs team have. So you don't want to let this go to waste either. I don't know. I'm very, very excited to see how this continues to pan out. I feel great for the Philadelphia Eagles. They won not only on the back of their perseverance on offense, but defense. Interception in the end zone by Kevin Byard. They got right before the trade deadline. Bradley Roby punching the ball out in the red zone. 2 red zone takeaways. Those are huge, huge, huge factors to win a game. Complimentary football, all of that. Jason Kelce gets his first win over his brother, Travis Kelce.
Over Travis, who did a lot. I mean,
did a ton.
Look.
A ton.
Like,
for every ball that these other guys didn't catch, Travis Kelce caught him.
You kind of saw like things are topping out at what a tight end can do when there's nobody else.
Yeah.
There's so much more to say about the Eagles, though. You should go listen to Locked On Eagles. I know the boys over there are going to have a big old party today.
They're going to have a great time with this one. And we're going to have a great time coming up too, because Luke, we get to do one of our favorite things. We get to pour one out for 3 different football teams this week.
God, I love prematurely declaring teams dead. Love it. Before Thanksgiving? Yes.
You gotta love it. And we can't wait. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL.
Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is a great place to get tickets to those kinds of games. Let's say that you have spoken with your family about Thanksgiving. Oh my goodness, the game that's in our city, we want to go to it. Maybe you just had that idea on a whim right now. Getting tickets would be a total nightmare, right? But that's kind of exactly what Gametime is for. Last-minute tickets, flash sales, trying to get you tickets that aren't marked up by a 4-digit number just because they are so last minute. And they can give you a picture. There's like zone deals where you can see where your seat is. You can make sure that you're happy with the view and the Gametime guarantee. So if you get the same row and section that you got on Gametime, if you find those same seats somewhere else for cheaper, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. They are that confident that it's the best deal in town. So go to the Gametime app, download it, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account on the Gametime app and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Today's episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is therapy online made easy. If you're thinking about getting into therapy, and I personally always recommend that you at least give it a try. I think it's something that can be for everybody. It is maintenance. To me, it's going to the gym for your mental health, but it can be hard to get into it because a lot of people will start therapy. They'll get someone that totally isn't right for them. They don't like however they talk. They might not even be the most serious person. And you should try again. Say, okay, that one didn't work. Let me try a different therapist. They are so much more different than you could ever imagine. But a lot of people have the first one and think that's just what therapy is like. BetterHelp is trying to get you out of that by giving you a really easy and free way to set up multiple consults and switch therapists at any time. To find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp, visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
All right, everybody, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. Big thank you to all the everydayers out there making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out Locked On Sports today. Locked On, we just did something really cool. We released the first national sports 24/7 YouTube stream ever.
Oh, let's go.
Ever. So go and be a part of history and check us out. Subscribe to Locked On Sports today so you can keep up with everything going on around the world of sports here with Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Luke, it's time to pour one out for 3 teams, man. Who are we saying bye to? Let's get them out of here. Bye.
Let's get them out of here. So if you need some catching up, we have poured one out for the teams that we think are dead in the water. The season's over. That's it. In the past, we have made these declarations. Those teams are Carolina, Chicago, Green Bay, Arizona, New England, the New York Giants, and the Indianapolis Colts. At some point, we've decided that those guys are done, not making the playoffs. If we're wrong, sorry.
We won't be.
You can't do anything about it. This is a podcast. But we got 3 more teams that we want to add to this. What are you going to arrest me? Call the cops. I dare you. How about those New York Jets? Well, I think it's time. You take it 22-6. Look, I get it. They're holding out for the Aaron Rodgers return. You're going to be 6-9, and he's going to come back, and you're going to be eliminated anyways.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It feels like we're circling the drain a little bit here. I think the Jets have to pull off like a winning streak now, and Tim Boyle ain't doing it for you, man.
Say, you don't think Tim Boyle's going to get it done, dude? You don't think Tim Boyle's going to get it done?
That's a white flag if I have ever seen one.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough over there in the Meadowlands, regardless of which team is playing, but specifically the New York Jets. The thing that's really like the bright spot for them, like if you're a Jets fan and you're looking for like, okay, so what should I be excited about? It's the defense, right? Like all the conversation's going to go. Yeah, all the conversation's going to go to, the quarterback and to Aaron Rodgers, to what's going on with Zach Wilson, all that. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit too. But for me, like if you're looking forward to 2024, which I think makes sense if you're a Jets fan right now, okay, well, what does 2024 look like? It's youth and defense. Like that defense has been great. I think Robert Saleh is awesome for that team as well. Like there's a lot of stuff that's good for this team after this season, but for this season, 2023, got to pour one out.
Yeah, and hopefully you get Aaron Rodgers back, and that's works out better next time, right? That's kind of all you can hope.
Yeah.
So much for a speed bridge.
Yeah.
So how about the Washington Commanders? How are we feeling about pouring them out right now after their loss to Tommy DeVito.
Yeah. Look, anytime that you lose to Tommy DeVito, you're going to hear it. You're going to hear about it.
You can't. Come on, man.
18 to 26, 246 yards, 3 touchdowns, a 137.7 passer rating. He also even had a rush for 7 yards, and I'm going to include that too. Like, it is just, it's like you didn't expect this. I thought that the New York Giants were going to go in and they were just going to kind of fizzle out. You know what I mean? Like, Daniel Jones is done. Like, yeah, will Daniel Jones ever play another snap as a New York Giant? What's going to happen with Brian Dable moving forward? Also, I thought they were just going to kind of fizzle out, go into their offseason thing. But yet, Tommy DeVito, Syracuse legend, comes in and leads them to this 31-19 victory. Luke, not even just like a 27-24 victory. All right.
In fairness, it was 24-19 with the Commanders.
That's true.
At the end of the game, and then they had a pick six.
Yeah,
that pick six though was very funny. The Sam Howell thing has reached its apex. You had a couple of fun games, and I think this guy is entering the just because he's what's on my mind, the Josh Dobbs territory, the Case Keenum Hall of backups. That's where you belong probably. And it might be time for the Commanders to consider a more serious quarterback. But if you listen to like David Harrison on Locked On Commanders, Sam Howell was the guy the whole time. He was 100%. The guy. 100%. No, I don't think they even really looked at drafting a quarterback as like an option in the draft any more than any team would. Like, they didn't look at this and go, we're going to get our quarterback. And if not Sam Howell, it's like, no, Sam Howell's our guy. Let's see what D tackles are out there.
Yep. 100%. And now, like, going into next year, like, you have to start asking the question, is Ron Rivera still there next year? If Ron Rivera is not the head coach next year, then what does that mean for Sam Howell if a new head coach is coming in and everything? And
it just feels like that organization still needs him. I mean, they're still licking their wounds from all the Dan Snyder stuff. It's like they just got out of like a messy divorce, Yeah. And Ron Rivera is like the guy that was the best man at that wedding that saw through all of it. And really, you need him to be there for you right now. You can't kick that guy out of the house. Then you're going to spiral. I feel like that org needs him for one more year. And I don't think the Commanders are poorly coached. I think they're poorly built. And that the front office structure is changing enough.
You don't have any faith in the previous regime there to build something sustainable, Luke?
Probably not. Hey, there's another team that has really failed to build something. They built something sustainable. I don't know what they're sustaining. It's the Tennessee Titans. Boy, a dark moment in the post-game presser after the Jacksonville Jaguars with Vrabel. What did he say?
Mike Vrabel, the head coach of the Tennessee Titans, says about the Jacksonville Jaguars, who had just beaten them. I believe this was his day after press conference. So the Jacksonville Jaguars beat the Tennessee Titans 34-14. Mike Vrabel says to everybody that the Jacksonville Jaguars are just a better coached team, which is a wild thing for your team's head coach to say out loud at a press conference. They're just a better coached team. Meaning, I didn't coach my team very well. It's so wild that he would say that. Talk about a guy that might also be out of a job next year. It might be Mike Vrabel.
So I'm looking just at the standings in the AFC right now, and you'll see, you got the Texans at 6, like the wild card, right? You've got a 7-win team and a couple of 6-win teams sitting in the wild card right now. And then the Titans are at 3-7. So we're talking win out territory here for the Titans.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a similar dynamic for the Commanders. I like the Titans. You get the Panthers, the Colts, maybe you go on a run, but Dolphins, Texans, Seahawks, Texans, Jaguars, that might be 5 playoff teams in a row if things play out a certain way.
Rough.
And the Commanders have the 49ers left. They've got 2 games against the Cowboys left. So part of this too is just looking at these teams that are in a deep, deep, deep hole. Positioning wise, there's 6 weeks left in the season. They're like 2 or 3 games back from even sniffing a wild card spot, and they got a bunch of hard teams coming up. It's like I don't see how it happens.
Yeah, Yeah, it's tough. Here's the exact quote, thanks to Tyler Roldan of Locked On Titans. They're a better coach. They're better coached, and they've got a better team right now. That's why that's why they lost to the Jaguars.
That's a guy that feels like he's about to get fired. I don't think you say that if you think your job.
No shot.
That's a lame duck quote if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, you don't say that and expect to show up to work again.
I don't know where the Titans are going, to be honest. I mean, like they're just they're like sellers on everything. They're like putting this. I mean, are they going for another quarterback? You've done this 2 years in a row, y'all. What are you doing?
I think I don't know. Like, first of all, I think they should have traded Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry of now is not the Derrick Henry of the past, right? I think they should have traded Derrick Henry, although they might have tried, and then maybe there's just not a market for it. And then now you got to find a way to build around. And I think you just try to build around Will Levis. But then again, like if you change head coach, then what does that mean? Because Will Levis isn't that head coach's guy. So do you go and find the head coach that wants to work with Will Levis, or do you have to end up making a series of decisions based on a potential change this offseason? Like it's a lot where Tennessee might be headed.
Yeah. And maybe that's a Black Monday thing to talk about, because I think that's probably a plus if I like the guy you have in the building, but if it's like, no, I actually really like this dude that's coming out in 2025 and I have this whole plan around him, it's like, man, we spent a second and a third on those quarterbacks. Like, just eat it. I think that's okay.
Yeah.
But we have, I've got some stuff I want to talk about that I'm not okay with.
Yeah, I hear you. Let's get to our yike and our like here as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On NFL.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's number one sportsbook, and it's America's number one sportsbook for a reason. They've got all kinds of really, really cool promos going on all the time. But if you are new and you haven't signed up with FanDuel yet and you're thinking about it, it's a great time to do it, because you can go get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. So any money line, can be NBA, NHL, NFL, whatever. Go put $5 on a money line, even if they are a heavy favorite, and you can get $150 back in bonus bets if it wins. Functionally, that's 30-1 odds on a heavy favorite. That is value you will not find anywhere else. So if you have been thinking about joining FanDuel, get on in there, go explore spreads, over-unders, weird prop bets, parlay it all together, all kinds of fun stuff. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked-on to claim $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on, official partner of the NFL.
All right, everybody, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On NFL with our yike and our like, something that we liked, something that we didn't like from the week of football that just passed as we get into our next week. And Luke, this one's all yours, man. You're freaking free.
Let's start with this. All right, here's the deal. Kareem Jackson suspended for helmet hits, or leading with the helmet. For one, big yike to appeal your 4-game suspension, get it reduced to 2, and 3 plays into your return after that reduced suspension, you immediately do the thing again. And he has had several infractions. This is like his 7th or 6th infraction on the year, something like that. So he had, like, for the league to start suspending you instead of just fining you for that, they're going to be like really pissed off. And no lesson learned. You've learned nothing and changed nothing about the way you play after this. Yeah. Which sucks, because like Kareem Jackson is an older player. Like he's been around. He has seen the league and its rules, and it's not like this is a new rule. The spearing thing, call it targeting for college, has been around for decades. So I don't know what's going on here. In the game against the Vikings, he lowers his helmet, he leaves his feet and launches, gets another 4-game suspension. By the way, that hit not flagged. But I think my real yike goes to the teammates of the Broncos that are bending over backwards to try and justify this clearly flagrant hit that violates the rule, like to the letter, exact counterexample. Ron Johnson, who does the Locked On Vikings postcast and some stuff on Locked On Minnesota Sports, said like that's the tape that you bring into the officials meeting to like train officials on what to call. Like it's like the perfect example of it. Yeah. Justin Simmons posts a clip of him leading with the shoulder, actually doing a really good counterexample of how not to get flagged on a hit like that. And being like, I did this. Why didn't I get flagged? Like, dude, that's different. It's because you did it different. Pat Surtain is all over it. Like, I get that his teammates are just trying to stick up for their teammate,
sure.
right? And people, like, teammates will say stuff that's plenty detached from reality. You'll have people be like, I think Zach Wilson can be MVP. It's like, sure, Jets, you say that. But when safety is involved, and lest I be accused of sour grapes, I do not care that it like caused a fumble and that it should have been a flag or whatever. That the Vikings turned it over 3 times. That's their fault.
Yeah.
But when player safety is involved, the league should step in. I called for it on my show. I'm going to call for it on this show too. I think NFL officiating should put out a statement that was a missed call and that they should admit that they did a poor job of officiating and policing the game on Sunday Night Football in primetime.
Yeah, I think the NFL and NFL officiating should just have that statement and release it after every single game. After every single game. Doesn't matter. All right, I'm going to jump to my like here because this is it kind of is in the same vein. Tom Brady, y'all might remember him. Was on yeah, right. Former quarterback, did some things, got some rings.
Oh, the Bucs guy. Yeah,
right. Yeah, the Bucs quarterback. The Michigan guy.
The Michigan guy.
He was
Michigan player, also embroiled in scandals about filming practices. But who's to say what's what?
Who's to say, really? Who's counting? So he was on Stephen A. Smith's podcast. And in Stephen A. Smith's podcast, he talked about that there's a lot of mediocrity around the NFL. And I loved this. I love this so much. Talk about a lot of mediocrity in the NFL. When he was asked why,
he's so right,
because he's right. He's 100% right.
Oh,
and when he was asked why, the 2 things that he said was that because coaching is not very good and because development is not very good. And I could not agree more. Luke and I were talking before we started recording today about how in a couple of weeks we're going to do an episode about how many new head coaches there might be next year because of how just poor coaching is around the NFL this season. And it doesn't come down to just head coaches, but is the other thing too. Like when we have that conversation, it will be all head coaches, but coordinators, assistant coaches, position coaches, all of this stuff like are a part of this conversation. And I could not agree with Tom more on this issue, especially the development issue. Michelle Majuk, who co-hosts our Locked On Fantasy Football show here with Vinny Iyer, spoke about this on X or on social media about how like it's not, there's no way there's not 32 people in the world who can play quarterback, right? Like at the NFL level, like there's got to be 32 people who can do it, but yet we see like 10 to 15 good quarterbacks at a time. Why is that? And development, opportunity, like these are all a big thing with it. So
I have 2 theories on that.
Yeah, please.
One, time. There's less practice 100%. Time than ever. Yep. And teams are less and less patient than ever because the criticism, because I mean, 20 years ago, we did not have this world of social media. The criticism is louder and louder and louder. You hear everyone's thoughts on everything. And that cacophony of thoughts feels a lot louder when you hear it every single day, instead of just maybe the boos when they're really, really mad on Sundays. Mm-hmm. You're just not as patient, right? Yep. I mean, we used to live in a world where a quarterback would get drafted, and if they played at all in their first year, it was a story.
Shocker.
We don't live in that world anymore.
Yep, 100%.
The second thing is, there are 32 people who can play quarterback. I think there are 100 people who can play quarterback at an NFL level, but it's a bell curve, right? Mm-hmm. There can only naturally be 15 good ones, because if we call 30 of them good, that no longer is good, right? If you're not in the top half of the league, you're not good. So naturally there must be a cutoff, and the cutoff is just changed. If you showed this season to like an NFL person in the 60s, their nose would bleed and they would pass out.
100%. 100%. The NFL needs a developmental league. That's all I'm saying. They needed a developmental league or 2. And I think that would help a ton.
Hashtag for the love of football. I have a quick like.
Yep.
Just some good teams getting back on track, right?
Yep.
Bills go get a nice, easy win against the Jets, exercise the demons from their week 1 loss, right?
Yes.
The 49ers on that 3-game skid.
Yep.
Just go beat the crap out of the Bucs, who, by the way, the Bucs on that cusp of playoff range too, like the Bucs, not a cupcake at all. Right. Just go beat the heck out of them at home, right? Just go like get yourself back. I love to see that, right? The Lions getting back on track after a rough start against Chicago, getting that comeback. The teams that we think this season was going to be made of are figuring out after some hiccups in October. I like it.
Yep. Yep, big fan of that as well. My like was about mediocrity, and therefore I wanted to make my yike about mediocrity as well. And so I'm just going to say the words third string quarterback Zach Wilson, because that is wild to me. Wild to me. The New York Jets moving ahead with Tim Boyle as their starting quarterback, Trevor Siemian as their backup quarterback, and now Zach Wilson as their third string quarterback. Might be temporary, could just be lesson learned kind of stuff, but man, that is quite the statement to make about a guy that you invested so highly in, and that you were very loudly supporting after the Aaron Rodgers injury, saying he's our guy, he's our quarterback. Well, right now
they're still saying it
doesn't look like it. I know
they're still like, no, we think he's the future. Like, no, you don't. You just put in Tim Boyle. Let it go.
Yeah, 100%. Sure, he's your future. Completely believe that.
Just let it die, Jets. Oh, just draft one of these 7 quarterbacks coming out and move on.
Yep. And I think they might do exactly that. All right, y'all. Coming up tomorrow, it is going to be Tony and James taking you through some of the biggest questions around the NFL, biggest stories around the NFL, and of course, our weekly power rankings. We appreciate you very much for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day every day, and for being here with us yet again. We will see you next week. For Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL on your favorite social media. I am Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola. We appreciate you very, very much. And we'll see you again here soon on the Locked On NFL podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.